Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I am Tracy Banner, and today I want to share a video a little bit about oxyacetylene welding. And to start off with, the most important thing I think about welding is learning how to control that puddle. When I was 5 years old, I can remember learning how to oxyacetylene weld with my grandfather. Now, Grandpa learned it, I'm not sure where, but his father was an oil rigger. Traveled the United States back in the early 1900s. And I don't know what he did, but Grandpa knew how to do body work on cars and how to weld with a torch. And that's where I first got my view of controlling the puddle. So what I'm trying to say is oxyacetylene welding has been around for over a century now. And before that, we used coal in furnaces to melt metal down, or we used coal in forges to heat metal up, and then borax for a flux, and hammered it together and made shapes and welded steel back together. So I'm going to go over this about the history to start with the best I can. If I don't get it perfect, please understand that I didn't pronounce something possibly right. And the years that I say it, I'm trying to get it exact to you, but today we still use oxyacetylene, whether it's welding or cutting in the field in construction. In 1836, Edmund Davy had tried some experiments with it, hadn't done a great deal with it yet. In 1860, Marcellin Bartlett had created some other things with the stone of carbon, calcium carbon. But in 1862, Frederick Waller, if I pronounced that right, had taken calcium carbide and water, put it in a test tube, warmed it up. Well, as soon as they put it in a test tube, it creates a vapor. They don't have to put no heat to it. It creates a vapor gas. When water would hit the calcium carbide rock or ground up rock into a powder form, it would create a vapor. And then it could be ignited with a striker or a match. A hot flame would ignite it. In 1892 or so, Thomas Wilson and Moorhead had invented a lantern, and putting the calcium carbide into the smaller container of that area separate, and then water in the top. And the more water that you would drip into that, it would create that vapor. And then that would have the igniter on the outside like you do your striker for acetylene to light it, or your propane torch, and that flame would come out, and that would... Shortly after Wilson and Moorhead had taken the calcium carbide and water from the stone, I believe first, they decided to find a quicker way to manufacture it, and they took coal and lime, ground it up and mixed it. James Turner Moorhead and Thomas Wilson had gotten together with some of their colleagues, and they knew of somebody that had a furnace. So they got one furnace made, and they were trying experiments with other chemicals to make other things that they were trying to produce. So they decided to get a second furnace to speed up production of what they're trying to invent. And by accident, they had mixed a couple of items together, and this furnace was electrically charged. And whatever it is that they had fixed together, they had it tested when it cooled back down. That was a part of the process also, heating it up and then cooling it back down. And when they got done with it, it became calcium carbide. And today, there are still several places that make this. Claude and Hess, and they decided to use acetone because it was very dangerous if it was to spill or to get ignited. It was dangerous. They dissolved it in acetone. And later, in 1896, there was a chemist by the last name of Acetylene. I'm not 100% if I'm pronouncing that right. But he was the person that proposed to take acetone and use a porous mass in the container. So during that period of time in the mid to late 1890s, there was a light born. They could use this calcium carbide, buy it, whether it was ground up or I believe it was put into cans, and then you would mix it with water, and they have special processes of manufacturing the vapor gas. So during the period of this time of the late 1890s, Thomas Wilson and James Morehead had been making this calcium carbide and selling the patents to other companies. There were 8 companies total, and 7 of them didn't survive. The cost was just, with this electric charged furnace, it was just too much. And there were 2 companies that survived, and it was People's Gas and Coke Company of Chicago. And in 1898, those companies merged and became Union Carbide. Like I said, a light was born. It was used in cars. It was used in home appliances. It was used in boats and buoys and also lighthouses. It has been reported that some seamen, they liked that light, the acetylene lighthouse. They could see it better in the fog. In the year 1900, Frederick Baldwin had invented and patented the carbon miner's lamp. So as time went by in the late 1800s into the early 1900s, I do believe that Union Carbide came along and bought up those patents and made their bottles and used those patents, and it went for a long period of time. And in 1901 to 1903, Charles Pickard and Edmund Fauci had perfected how to use a torch to weld metal together, adding oxygen, mixing it into a torch. But that was the beginning of the early years. 1906, probably a lot of pipe was being welded on then with that torch. There was some piping I do remember working on in San Francisco that was just months or such after the big fire that happened in the earthquake of 1906 in San Francisco, but it was steel pipe that we were replacing in. That stuff was thick and it was soft. So it was just wrought iron pipe. But here's a small clip of using the oxygen acetylene torch. At this time I'm using the brazing. Got a little hole in the water tank. Dropped it on a rock or something, I don't know, but brazing it on there. I put a piece of metal in there first and had it all clean, and then I went around it, and then I covered it real good with the brass. But this is one way that it can be used. Many people, like doing this instead of using a MIG welder or a stick welder. Here's another method or a process, using it on oxygen acetylene, using it on muffler tubing. I know sometimes today they're using MIG welders, but this here process, if the welding machine was to stop because of electrical problems or because of fuel problems, the oxygen acetylene weld is a good weld. In pipeline, it is still being used on services on a lower grade pipe. The newer piping today is like X52 and up, and if a person is going to weld like oxyacetylene welding on natural gas piping, it's because the pipe needs to be X42 to X52. The welding rod is R60, stands for 60,000 tensile strength. And today, with the X52 and up, they want you to use 6010 or 7010 and up, and it can't always be used because they're standard. But on services, if it's a lower grade pipe, it can be used. In a future video, I can make videos of showing how to use this torch, how to set the gauges, and all the different tips, what they're used for. If anybody wants to learn how to weld open butt root weld on pipe, I am more than happy to make a video on it and show everyone how to do that process. It is slowly being turned away from, but like I said, in emergency times and on services, it's still being used. Welding on smaller diameter pipe, low grade piping. It is a skill.